Sit back in your chair, feet flat, arms crossed, palms on the opposite shoulders. This is the 30-second chair test, and it tells you something blunter than fitness, whether you're still carrying your own shopping up your own front steps 10 years from now. Here's the answer first. Stand up and sit down as many times as you can in 30 seconds, hands never touching anything. That count predicts your next decade better than almost anything you can measure at home. And almost everyone reads their own number backwards, because this was never a test of your legs. Let's get your number, and let's do it properly, because a sloppy version gives you a flattering score, and a flattering score is worth nothing. Use a dining chair, not an armchair, a firm seat roughly 17 inches off the floor, which is about the height of a standard kitchen chair or a toilet. Back against the backrest, feet flat, about hip width, arms crossed on your chest, and they stay crossed. A full rise means your knees straighten completely and your hips come all the way up. A full sit means your backside actually touches the seat. If you feel lightheaded, stop and stay sitting. That's information too, and I'll come back to it. Ready. 30 seconds. Go. And I'll stay quiet because me talking over you will throw your rhythm off. Count out loud if it helps. Right. Hold your number. Here's where it sits. Men 60 to 64. The middle of the pack is 14 to 19. 65 to 69. 12 to 18. 70 to 74. 12 to 17. 75 to 79. 11 to 17. 80 to 84. 10 to 15. Women 60 to 64. 12 to 17. 65 to 69. 11 to 16. 70 to 74. 10 to 15. 75 to 79, also 10 to 15, 80 to 84, 9 to 14, and fewer than 8 rises at any age below 85 is the number a physiotherapist quietly circles. Those bands come from work published by Roberta Rickley and Jesse Jones, updated in the journal The Gerontologist in 2013, and the band that surprised me is the 75 to 79 one. The top of that band is 17, the top of the 62-64 band is 19. 2 rises apart, 15 years apart. Whatever this test is measuring, it is clearly not measuring how long you've been alive. Hold on to your figure, because near the end I'll give you the one change to how you practice this that actually moves the number, and it isn't more repetitions, and it isn't the half of the movement you'd expect. Before that, you need to know why your score is a result and not yet a diagnosis. Standing up is not a strength problem. It's a torque problem. And torque is the trade of crane operators. Every crane carries a load chart, a laminated grid in the cab that says almost nothing about how strong the machine is. It only says how far out the load sits. Same engine, same steel. 40 tons tucked in close to the mast, 4 tons at the far end of the boom. Distance is the entire story. Now sit in that chair and find your center of mass. It's a point roughly behind your navel, and when you're seated it sits several inches behind your feet, behind them. Your feet are the base, and the load is dangling off the back edge of it. Nothing on earth lifts a load that isn't over its base, and your nervous system has known this since you were 11 months old, which is why the first event in a chair rise is never a push, it's a lean. The trunk swings forward and travels your center of mass over your feet, and that swing takes about 4/10 of a second. Then, and only then, the hips leave the seat and the knees start extending, which takes roughly another second. Add it up, and one clean rise costs around 1.5 seconds. So if you manage 16 in 30 seconds, you are completing a full stand and sit cycle in under 2 seconds each, over and over, which is a genuinely fast piece of coordination, and you should be pleased with it. Here's the part you may recognize. Somewhere in the last few years, you might have started rocking. Not one lean, 2 small rocks forward, gathering yourself before you commit to standing. Or you've caught yourself counting silently, 3, 2, 1, before rising from a low sofa. That isn't a habit, and it isn't laziness. It's a substitution. Your body is borrowing momentum because it can no longer generate the force fast enough to do it from a standstill, and the rock is how it makes up the difference. Most people have never once connected that little rock to anything measurable. It is the earliest visible sign in the whole system. When Cynthia Jones, Roberta Rickley, and Barry Beam published the 30-second chair stand in Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport in 1999, they weren't trying to predict anything. They were trying to replace a leg press machine. They needed a way to estimate lower body strength in adults between 60 and 94 without hauling gym equipment into community halls, and the chair count tracked the machine well enough to use. The shortcut then turned out to beat the instrument it was standing in. For a leg press asks your quadriceps one question. The chair asks four questions at once. Can you make the force? Can you time it? Can you balance at the top? And do your ankles and hips still have the range to get there? And it fails at whichever of the four is worst. In 2012, a sports physician in Rio de Janeiro named Claudio Gil Araujo published something that made the rest of medicine pay attention. At his clinic, Clinimex, he had been asking patients to sit down on the floor and get back up, scoring them out of 10, docking a point each time a hand or a knee went down for support. 2002 adults, aged 51 to 80. He followed them for about 6 years. The people scoring in the bottom group died at several times the rate of the people scoring at the top. And I want to be straight with you about that number, because you'll see it quoted online as 6 times the risk of death, with nothing attached to it. That version is inflated in the retelling. Araujo's patients were people attending a cardiology clinic in one Brazilian city, not a random slice of the public, and the low scorers were also heavier and sicker at the start. The floor test is also a harder test than the chair test. Different height, different demand. What survives all of that is the shape of the finding, and the shape is what matters. The ability to move your own body weight against gravity unaided carries more information about the next 10 years than most things measured in a blood tube. Because the four systems don't decline together, and that's the whole reason this works. Muscle force fades on one clock, ankle range fades on another, quietly without symptoms, usually because of an old sprain, and 30 years of shoes with a raised heel. Balance fades on a third. Timing fades on a fourth and fastest. Any single test catches one of those. The chair catches whichever one broke first, and the body's fate is set by its weakest link, not its average. Here's what that looks like as a lived decade rather than a statistic. It doesn't arrive as a fall. It arrives as a shrinking radius. First, the low sofa in the front room stops being the seat you choose. Then the bath becomes a shower, then a shower with a stool, then the bus with the high step gets swapped for a taxi, then the taxi gets swapped for not going. Nobody makes a decision. Nobody tells the doctor. The world just closes in one seat height at a time, and by the time anyone measures anything, the score is 4. So why does a test of standing up beat a test of squeezing a handle? The answer isn't force at all. It's speed, and it's the next thing I want to show you. In 2015, The Lancet published the Pure study, grip strength measured in 139,000 adults across 17 countries. Every 5 kilograms of grip you lacked came with about 16% higher risk of dying in the follow-up period. That finding is solid, and it made grip strength famous. But grip is a force measurement. It asks one muscle group how hard, and it never asks how fast. Here's the number that reframes everything. After about 60, your maximum strength declines somewhere around 1 to 1.5% a year. Your power, force delivered quickly, declines closer to 3 or 4% a year. 2 to 3 times faster, which means the ability to stand up at all and the ability to stand up quickly are two different currencies, and you're being drained of the second one at triple the rate. The reason sits in your motor units. A motor unit is one nerve cell in your spinal cord plus every muscle fiber it commands, the smallest thing your brain can actually switch on. By your 70s, a leg muscle may be running on roughly a third fewer functioning motor units than it had at 25. And physiologists still argue about how much of that is true loss versus reorganization. What's clear is which ones go first. The fast ones. Think of a haulage yard that retires its express vans and hands their routes to the long-haul lorries. The fibers don't die. They get adopted by a slower nerve, and they keep working on a slower schedule, answering a slower phone. So you can still stand. You cannot still stand fast, and catching a stumble requires useful force in under 0.2 of a second, which is roughly the window the express vans used to cover. That's why this test predicts what it predicts. It isn't measuring how much force your legs can produce. It's measuring how fast four systems can agree with each other. And agreement is the first thing to go. If that just reframes something for you, subscribe now, because there's a second half to this, and it explains why two people with identical scores need completely different practice. So, seated, your weight hangs behind your feet. A rise costs a lean, a transfer, and a push, about 1.5 seconds when it's clean. 16 of those in 30 seconds puts you mid-pack in your early 60s. Fewer than 8 get circled at any age. Strength falls about 1% a year, Power falls 3 or 4. And the chair beats the hand grip meter for one reason. Grip asks one question, and the chair asks 4, which leaves the question I haven't touched. Two men, both 71, both score 11. One of them will be at 14 in 3 months. The other will still be at 11 in 3 years, doing exactly the same practice. 11 is a result, not a diagnosis. And until you know which of the 4 systems is your break, you're training the 3 that aren't. So find out. Sit down again. This time, slide your feet back 2 or 3 inches until your shins tilt forward past vertical and your knees are slightly ahead of your ankles. Cross your arms, stand 5 times at your own pace, and pay attention to 4 things. If it was noticeably easier, your break was geometry. You'd been sitting with your feet too far forward, hanging your load off the end of the boom. And you can reclaim rises today. If your heel lifted off the floor, your break is ankle range. That's dorsiflexion, the ability of your shin to travel forward over your foot. And it's the drawer in your house that no longer opens the last inch. The contents are still in there. You just can't reach them. If your hips shot backwards and your chest dropped towards your knees, your break is your hip extensors, mainly the gluteus maximus, and you're rising with your back instead of your backside. And if you were steady on the way up but wobbled at the very top, your break is neither strength nor range. It's proprioception, the position sense feed from your ankles and hips. Now the harder part. Everything so far has treated your score as a report on damage already done. Turn it the other way round. Your score is a bank balance, and the bill arrives in a week you haven't had yet. In 2007, JAMA published a study led by Michael Cortabine. Healthy older volunteers, a dozen of them, put on strict bed rest for 10 days. 10 days cost them around a kilogram of lean leg tissue, more than most people lose in years of ordinary aging. It was a small study of well people and hospital patients who were ill and often eating badly, generally do worse than that. So a chest infection, a hip operation, a bad flu with 10 days in bed, and a man who walked in at 12 walks out at 5. Nobody measures it on discharge. Nobody measures it on admission either, which means nobody can tell whether he got weaker or arrived that way. That's the part that isn't in any statistic. The score isn't your current ability, it's your margin for the next unplanned fortnight. Now, if you've got osteoarthritis in a knee, or a replacement, or a back that starts objecting around the 12th rise, then a lot of what I've just said sounds like it was written about somebody else's body. Fair. You're not being stubborn, and you're not making excuses. A joint that hurts genuinely changes what you're able to produce, and being told to count rises when the third one stings is annoying. Here's what changes and what doesn't. Raise the seat, put a firm cushion on the chair, or use a higher chair entirely, and count the same way. Then stop comparing yourself to the bands, because a population map can't diagnose one knee. Compare yourself to yourself, same chair, same cushion, first Sunday of every month. And know this, pain alters your strategy long before it alters your strength. You'll lean less and push harder, which shows up as a slower rise months before it shows up as a weaker one. Physiotherapists still disagree about whether to test into discomfort or stop short of it. I stop short of it, which brings me to the change I promised, the one that actually moves the number. It isn't repetitions. Stop practicing standing up. Practice sitting down. The lowering half of that movement is an eccentric contraction, the muscle producing force while it lengthens, which is what a rope does when you lower a piano rather than haul it up. A muscle can generate meaningfully more force controlling a load downward than lifting it, perhaps a third more, and it does so at a lower heart rate and a lower sense of effort. So the descent is where the overload lives, and it's the half almost everybody drops onto the chair like a sack. Here's the exact version. Dining chair, feet slid back so the shins tilt forward, arms crossed. Stand up once, then take 5 full seconds to lower yourself, counting out loud so you don't hold your breath, because holding your breath against effort spikes your blood pressure. 5 repetitions. 3 sets 3 days a week, never 2 days running. And here is the rule that separates this from every other version you've heard. When 5 slow descents feel controlled, do not add a 6th repetition. Take away an inch of seat height instead. Remove a cushion. Remove a folded towel. Move to a lower chair. Repetitions train the range you already own. Depth is the only thing that gives you range back, and range was one of the 4. 2 more things, because this has to work in a real house. Don't do it first thing in the morning if you take blood pressure medication. Repeated rising drops pressure, and mid-morning near a kitchen counter is the sensible place. And practice on the lowest safe seat in the house, not the dining chair, because the standardized test seat is 17 inches while your sofa is about 15 and your low armchair is worse. The seat that ambushes people is never the one they trained on. Now the honest limit, and I'd rather say it than have you discover it. Every study I've quoted you is a prediction study. Araujo's work, the Lancet grip data, the Rickley and Jones norms, all of them show that the score forecasts what follows. Not one of them proves that raising your score changes what follows. Nobody has run that trial, and it would be expensive and slow. So the prediction is well established. The promise that improving the number rewrites the decade is inference. I train it anyway, and here's my reason. The 4 things this test measures are the 4 things you need to get off a bathroom floor on your own at 2 in the morning. I'll take those on inference. Picture the same body in 10 years, twice. One version has been lowering itself slowly onto a 15-inch seat 3 days a week for a decade and can still get out of a taxi without planning it. The other version has been avoiding the low chair. Both of them made a decision this week. Only one of them noticed. So, 4 steps. 1. Score yourself properly today and write the number down with today's date, because a number without a date is a feeling. 2. Slide your feet back until your shins tilt forward and never rise from a chair any other way again. 3. 5 slow descents, 5 seconds each. 3 sets, 3 days a week on non-consecutive days. 4. When 5 feel easy, drop the seat by an inch instead of adding a rep and retest yourself on the first Sunday of every month. That 3rd step is the one that changes the score. And if it was new to you, hit like. It's the only signal that puts this in front of somebody else who's been blaming their knees for a problem in their ankles. Share this with one person you've watched start rocking before they stand. They won't have noticed themselves doing it. And before you go, comment 3 things: your age, the country you're watching from, and your number from that test at the start. Nothing else. I read them, and I want to see where the line really falls, because the published bans come from a few thousand people, and there are far more of you than that. Nobody loses the ability to stand. They lose the habit of standing fast.